Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going over the polling averages for the 2024 United States Senate map and going over each race where the polling averages say the state is right now and assigning it to the Senate map, basically an election prediction for the 2024 Senate map election. This is what the polling averages say right now. So for example, just to show you what I mean, the state of New Mexico right now is going on the map. New Mexico is currently the Democratic incumbent is leading by 9.5%. So that is just under the 10% threshold to be safe. So I'm going to characterize New Mexico as a likely Democratic seat. And right now that is New Mexico. So now we're going to go to the next state, which is the state of Texas, which is right next door. So we're going to go back to the Senate map and look at the state of Texas, where right now Ted Cruz is leading Democrat Colin Allred by 6 points, 48-42. That is over the 5% mark, which means it's more than lean, but it's not over 10, so it's not safe. So this would put Texas into the likely Republican column right now, based on the polling averages. Okay, next we're going to go to the state of Maryland. Maryland is a state that usually doesn't have too many contested races, but in this case it's actually very close, and there's only been a few polls conducted, but the Democratic challenger, also Brooks, is up against the Republican challenger, former Governor Larry Hogan, who is doing very, very well in the polls compared to typical Republicans in the state of Maryland. It is a 4.4% race, so it is actually under the 5% margin to be a likely state. According to the polling averages right now, this would actually put the state of Maryland into the lean Democratic column. And I'm sure Republicans would love to see Maryland go red on election night. I personally don't think it'll happen, but still nonetheless to see it that close in the polls. Next, we're going to go to the state of Florida. Florida right now, we're going to go to the state of Florida, where it is now a toss-up on the Real Clear Politics site. Rick Scott, the incumbent senator, is a 4.3% lead over the Democratic challenger, McCarcel Powell. This is a race that's definitely caught me by surprise. The most recent poll from the Hill Emerson shows it to be a 1-point race. 46 for Scott, 45 for McCarcel Powell. Definitely a lot of undecided vote left out there. I think right now, Rick Scott is still favored to win this race. And my own personal prediction for this race, I think Rick Scott will win it. But nonetheless, very interesting, like Maryland, to see a race I didn't think would be that close, getting very close. And due to the polling margins, Florida would be a lean Republican state, being under 5% in the RCP average. Right now, Republicans are at 50, Democrats are at 43. Now we're starting to get into the states that most political analysis or political analysts and such would consider the more toss-up states for this election cycle. And I'm going to start east and work my way west this time, which is the opposite of how I do it, so I'll mix things up a little bit. We're going to start with the state of Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania right now has Democratic incumbent Bob Casey going up against Republican challenger Dave McCormick. And this race is actually getting very interesting because for a long time, it was pretty much projected that Bob Casey was going to run away with this race. Very popular name in the state of Pennsylvania. McCormick was hovering around about where he's not too dissimilar now, about the low 40s. And in the last month or so, we've seen McCormick rise up in the polls up to as high at one point of 45%. And Casey, even though he's still leading in the polls, McCormick's starting to go back down. Casey has fallen to 46.8%. This is the lowest we've seen Casey for a decent while, back to 46.4 back in early May. So this race right now, I think Casey is still favored. I would still bet on Casey winning. But if the scenario where the Republicans, where Trump has a very good election night in 2024, it's not inconceivable to imagine Trump winning Pennsylvania and McCormick riding the coattails of Trump winning this race. It's not inconceivable. The 3% margin and the average certainly proves that. However, I do think Casey is definitely favored to win at this time, but nonetheless, very, very interesting. Pennsylvania and the lean Democratic column at this time. Next, we're going to move next door to the state of Ohio, a state at the presidential level that has moved very, very, very far to the Republican side, but at the Senate level, it's a dead heat right now between Democratic incumbent Sherrod Brown, Republican challenger Bernie Moreno, 3.6% right now, and the most recent poll from the Hill Emerson showed to be a 2-point race. This is one that I think Democrats would love to hold on to. It's definitely getting very, very close, and I think this one is really, really coming down to the wire. This might be the closest Senate race in the country right now. The numbers show Brown to have a 3.6% lead, but you have to remember, yes, the polls show Brown winning. There's a lot of undecided vote left, and we know Ohio is going to vote for Donald Trump in the presidential election, so you have to think there would be a little bit of Republican vote trickling down, that it might be enough to help Moreno win. So this is definitely one to keep an eye out for, especially if you're a Democrat and you want to see Brown win this race. You have to keep an eye on this one because this one I think is very, very close. But the polling average right now shows Brown has under 5% lead, so we're going to put Ohio in the lean Democratic column right now because that's what the polling average says. Now we're going to go up north to the state of Michigan. Michigan right now is a very close Senate race where we have two challenger candidates. We have Democrat Elisa Slotkin and Republican Mike Rogers. This is a 5-point race, so just enough to be in the lean column, but this is definitely a close race. It looks like the Democrat is not pulling ahead or pulling away with, but it's definitely a close lead. But I think the Democrat is certainly favored to win this race right now. I think the polling average has it as a lean Democratic seat, and I feel pretty confident in agreeing with that projection. After Michigan, we're going to move next door now to the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin is going to be one of the closest states on the presidential level. And on the Senate level, Democratic incumbent Tammy Baldwin is running up against Republican Eric Hovde. This race has been pretty consistent that Hovde has actually been one of the higher polling Republican challengers of all the Republican challengers in the toss-up seats this cycle. Still, it's not enough, though, as Tammy Baldwin's been hovering around that 50% mark. She hasn't dipped below 50% since back in about early July. I think right now the average says it at 5.2, and I think on election night we're going to see Tammy Baldwin win re-election. Could be closer than the numbers suggest, but I think Baldwin right now is certainly favored. And at 5.2%, that's just enough to put Wisconsin over into the likely column because it is just over by 5 percentage points. Next, we're going to move to the state of Montana. Montana, this is going to be one of the most hotly contested Senate races where Democratic incumbent Jon Tester is up against Republican challenger Tim Sheehy. It is a very close race. Sheehy's up right now 5.2%. Not pulling away with it, but definitely having a pretty sizable lead now with the Republican challenger. It looks like, barring a late polling change leading towards the election, it's actually favored to flip this seat. And at 5.2%, that would be enough to put Montana into the likely Republican column. Republicans would get up to 51, with Montana. Democrats are at 47. Moving into the final two battleground Senate seats left, we have the state of Nevada and then Arizona following that. The state of Nevada right now, this is a very interesting one that Real Clear Politics has as lean for the Democrats. Democratic incumbent Jackie Rosen has 50.5% in the Real Clear Politics average. Republican challenger Sam Brown has 39.8%. And this is one where you've seen a little bit of a close race back in maybe the middle of July, about a 5-point race. And then towards the end of July, about another 4-point race or so. But Jackie Rosen has just really opened up a massive lead over Sam Brown in the last few weeks, in the last month or so, where now it is a 10.7% lead. This is actually over the 10% threshold, which is enough to not actually put Nevada in the likely column, but in the safe column for the Democrats based on the polling average right now. Jackie Rosen way outperforming in the polls Sam Brown. Fully expect Jackie Rosen to win this seat on Election Day. And now the final Senate seat left, the state of Arizona. We're going to go to the Real Clear Politics average for Arizona, where this is a race where it looked like for a decent while it was a pretty blowaway for Ruben Gallego, the Democratic challenger, against Kari Lake, the Republican challenger, where it was about a 7-point lead for Gallego. It slowly started getting a little bit closer, a 2-point back in the middle of July, and then Gallego opened up a pretty decent lead with about 3 percentage points and an even more sizable lead, up to 6.7, 8 points at one point, and then started to go down a little bit. And now as we get closer to the election, it looks like the trend is Lake is remaining a little bit constant, maybe going up by a few tenths of percentage points, but Gallego's numbers in the polls are certainly going down. He was at 50% back on September 11th, and now, just about 5 days later, Gallego's down to 48% in the polling average. The trend right now certainly suggests this race is getting a lot closer. However, at 4.5%, right now you have to assume Gallego has a lean Democratic characterization at this time. Arizona's a race I think many have long written off that Gallego's going to win this seat, Kari Lake's going to lose. But this could be one that, depending on how election night goes, could be one to keep an eye out for. Maybe Kari Lake outperforms the polls and makes it a closer result than expected. So right now, according to the Real Clear Politics polling average, Republicans are projected to win 51 senators and Democrats 49. This would put the Republicans in the majority by 1 seat, and it would not be dependent on who wins the presidential election for a Senate majority like it is now, where it's 50-50. Now we know Republicans have 51, Democrats have 49. It's a very interesting map. It's a very close map. I'm a little bit surprised from some of my early projections, say a year ago. I'm a little bit surprised how much of a runaway Nevada is. I thought Nevada would be a lot closer. Considering at the presidential level, it's a very close race. Probably going to be under 1 to 2 percentage points for the winning candidate. And at the Senate level, it's a complete runaway right now, it seems. As for Montana being a likely Republican state, I'm not too shocked. It's a very Republican state for a Democratic incumbent. He's not running on a midterm election this time. He's running on a presidential election. That's a much tougher situation for him to try and win that. Ohio, Pennsylvania, close, definitely. Michigan, Wisconsin, very interesting. That will do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give it a like. And if you really liked it, please remember to click the subscribe button. And make sure you turn post notifications on so you always get notified when I post a new video. That way you never miss one. Also, please remember to share this video with your friends and family if you really like the video. And remember to stay tuned because I'll be posting at least one video every single day leading up until Election Day. So I'd really appreciate it if you keep coming back and watching those videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.